Здравствуйте, loves! It is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Arsenal SLR-104FR. This is a civilian market variant based on the AK-74M platform. This is something that I've had for quite a while. It's a subject that I'm meaning to cover for quite some time, and it's about damn time that I did an AK video. So, without further ado, let's get into it. But first, before we dive into the details of this particular rifle, a little bit of history would be necessary. Mikhail Kalashnikov, of course, is the designer of the AK family. He is credited with the birth of the AK-47, which is absolutely legendary and is the most produced rifle family to date. He actually was a prospective agricultural equipment engineer and designer, but his career was cut short by World War II. He was pressed into service, he served in a tank crew, was injured in battle, recovered from his wounds, and ended up designing rifles. Thanks to that, he actually ended up making the most popular rifle platform to date. That started with the AK-47, which of course came out in 1947. That evolved to the AKM, and then from there we see the birth of the AK-74. The AK-74 was, you guessed it, designed in 1974 by A.D. Kryakushin under supervision of Mikhail Kalashnikov. As opposed to the 7.62 by 39 cartridge that was utilized by the AK-47 and the AKM, this platform was actually built around the 5.45 by 39 cartridge. This is a direct answer to the Armalite AR-15, which utilized the 5.56 by 45 cartridge, and this allows soldiers to carry lighter rounds, therefore carry more rounds. It also increased effective range and accuracy. Finally, in 1991, just in time for the Soviet Union to delete itself, we have the release of the AK-74M. This would have been the Soviets' main infantry fighting rifle. The Russian Federation then, of course, inherits it as their own. And the M, standing for modernized, features glass-filled polyamide furniture, which replaces the wood furniture of the 74, an improved muzzle device, smooth dust cover, omission of lightning cuts in the front sight block and gas piston, separate bullet and bolt guides, and a side rail mount for optics. Now, with all the history out of the way, let me finally talk about my rifle. This is the Arsenal SLR-104FR. Now, you're gonna be like, Tactical Girlfriend, I thought we're talking about the AK-74M. Well, we are. This is a civilian variant sold by Arsenal. It's made in Bulgaria, imported, added furniture and other accessories that are made in the US to meet those weird little import requirements that everybody hates so much. And of course, even worse, it's not fully auto, thanks ATF. But it is an excellent example of a replica as close as you can get to the AK-74M on the civilian market in the United States. Starting with the receiver, it is a stamped steel receiver. It is very tough. I think that forged receivers technically being tougher doesn't necessarily translate into anything practical. Unless you're running this thing over multiple times in a monster truck rally, I don't think you're going to get any advantage out of a forged receiver, and forged receivers also tend to be heavier, which is a huge detractor for me. I like my rifles light and maneuverable. Rifle is fine, stamp receivers are absolutely fine. Now the barrel is a chrome-lined, cold hammer forged 16-inch barrel. That means it's plenty accurate, it's very reliable, and has a lot of lifespan in it. I've owned this rifle for a very long time, and I still get very nice tight groups with it, and I absolutely love the ballistics that it provides in tandem with the 5.45 cartridge. Moving on, we have the classic AK-74M muzzle brake. This is an extremely well thought out design, and I've never felt the need to replace it because it is so effective. This thing basically has 3 ports on the top to push gases upwards, thereby keeping your muzzle climb down. And also, by porting on either side, we allow the gases to escape laterally. This really keeps the rifle's recoil impulse very manageable, and I find that the recoil just kind of goes straight back into my shoulder and allows me to make for some really good follow-up shots. While we're at the muzzle end here, let's talk about the bayonet lug. You of course can get a 74M bayonet and easily just mount that like so. I'm personally not a huge fan of bayonets, and I don't see a very practical application to it, but it looks cool, and I'm a dork, and I kind of had to complete the look, so there you go. Another thing to geek out about on the bayonet is actually the bayonet sheath. What you can do is mount the bayonet to this lug here, and you got yourself a set of wire cutters. Also, the handle is polymer, so you don't electrocute yourself. Pretty nifty design. Not really useful at all for me, but figured I'd mention it. It's pretty cool. Moving on back, we of course have our standard AK leaf iron sights. They have the front sight post to line up with here, and the rear sight can be adjusted up to 1,000 meters in case you feel like God and you can smite people from many kilometers away. You do you. Moving on back, let's talk about the action, of course. It's a piston, and it has a charging handle on the right side, which is kind of backwards to me, but it is what it is. If you are shooting this, whatever you do, just don't get your hands caught up in this, otherwise you'll lose fingers, so just be careful. Further back, we have our optic rail, good for mounting optics too, because AKs generally don't really have any other good ways of mounting things without heavy modification, so this is what a lot of us are working with, unless you get real Gucci. But if you get a good mount for it, it's pretty effective. Moving on from there, we have, of course, our standard AK-74M stock. It actually folds onto the left side here with a push of a button. And that's really handy, especially if you want to store this in any compact manner. It's very easy to deploy too. And you could replace this pretty easily with an adapter for an AR stock that's telescoping. That's generally recommended, but I actually really like the length of pull on this and haven't felt the need to replace it. It also looks cool, and it also has a nice little trap door in the back that has your clean kit in it. I also want to talk about the magazine system here. The mags are inserted in an angle like this and then locked back. And they lock back on this retention tab, which you can push forward to then release the mag. Now again, this is a rock and lock system. It's not like the AR system where you just stick it in directly, but that has its advantages and disadvantages. Personally, I much prefer the AR mags and mag wells over anything like this, but one advantage to its credit is that it is a bit more reliable, especially in very cold environments where AR mags can get kind of locked up in the mag well, things just kind of freeze up. And this just generally is a bit more robust, even though it is kind of caveman. I also want to talk about the magazines themselves. There's many generations of these, of course, with a platform this old. And some of the earliest ones people mistakenly call Bakelite. They're actually not Bakelite, they're glass-infused polymer. Some of the later generations, such as the ones that I typically use, are just steel-reinforced polymer. And they're very, very lightweight, very tough. I don't have to worry about buying these secondhand and having any reliability issues whatsoever. They run great, and combined with a 545 especially, you can carry a lot of these, no problem. Now I know a lot of you are probably like, TGF, you didn't even talk about half of your rifle, what's going on? Well, I'm saving the best for last. We of course have the modifications and accessories that I've added to this rifle. First of all, I have the Magpul K2 grip. This replaces the standard popsicle stick grip. Those things actually have a pretty good reason for existing. They're not very ergonomic if you're using this barehanded or with thin gloves, but they are designed to be used with people wearing very thick gloves for very cold weather. I don't really live in such an environment as Siberia, so I don't really have a problem. So I like to opt for the Magpul K2 grip. I actually run this on all of my rifles, and it works great. It's also got a nice storage compartment in the bottom, so you can store your Skittles or M&Ms or whatever you want. The trigger I replaced. It's actually a drop-in trigger that I put in from FIME Group. It's also a two-stage trigger, just kind of feels a little bit better than the stock trigger. And it also is designed to eliminate trigger slap that the AK platform sometimes suffers from. It's a roughly 4-pound pull, so not too heavy, not too light. Trigger feels great. It's kind of just the Goldilocks for me. There's many other different kinds of AK triggers that you can drop in. This is just what I happen to get, and I really am happy with it. One of the most popular mods on an AK is to replace the safety with a safety that has a tab here to allow your trigger finger to actuate it. This one is from Krebs. It's a very popular one. There's a number of different options on the market. They all kind of do the same thing. They generally just save you from the hassle of doing the weird AK stretch exercises that are very unnatural. I strongly recommend if you have an AK, that's pretty much the first mod you do. It's also like the easiest gun mod you'll ever do. So really happy with that one. From there, I also have my Zenitco charging handle. It's just a big round boy that you put over your existing charging handle. It's got a textured rim around the side here. It's very easy to grab. Just a huge ergonomic improvement over the standard AK charging handle. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a very easy and affordable mod to make. I really like it. On the other side, of course, I have my optic mounting rail, so I wanted to mount an optic to it. I ended up using the RS Regulate AK-301M mount, which has sections of Picatinny here, so I could mount any standard Picatinny optic to it. The optic I'm using is a Primary Arms Advanced Microdot. This thing is the oldest optic I've ever owned, and it's actually really, really good. It gets pretty bright enough for daytime without getting to Aimpoint, burn your retina out bright. Battery lasts for 50,000 hours. You can keep it on as long as you want until then. And yeah, it's a very rugged, great optic. What's even more impressive is that I can actually take this mount off and put it back on as much as I want to. It actually retains zero extremely well. I don't know what RS Regulate does, but whatever they're doing a great job. If you're looking for an easy mounting solution as opposed to changing out all sorts of furniture, this is a really, really great way to go with RS Regulate mounts. Speaking of RS Regulate, I have the RS Regulate GKR-10M M-Lock foregrip. This thing, of course, allows me to add M-Lock accessories, allowing me to better customize my gun to my needs. It's very important, good to have. AK foregrips on their own are okay, but they could use a lot more improvement for modularity. This thing is rebranded by Kalashnikov USA. It's exactly the same model, they just have their logo on it. So if you do have trouble sourcing one, check out KUSA, they might have one. Also, I have my black Slate hand stop here that allows me to better control the rifle under recoil. I've also added an Arisaka light mount to the foregrip, onto which I have mounted an Olight Odin and tape switch because every firearm deserves a good weapon light. Boop, boop. And last but not least, every rifle needs a sling, so I added my favorite, the Ferro Concept Slingster. Now, for my overall impressions on the Arsenal SLR-104FR, I love it. As far as AKs go, I think it's one of the finest examples out there. It's extremely rugged, very reliable, and very, very well built. Now, I have owned this rifle longer than any other rifle that I currently own. That includes all the ARs that I've ever tried and built. But since then, I have been converted to the AR platform. I do think it's just generally a better option. But if you are absolutely married to the AK platform and you can find a used SLR-104FR, I think you'll do really well for yourself if you do that. That said, I think that this thing wins in the aesthetic department over ARs hands down, and it is a really fun range toy. Well, that about rounds out my AK expose. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it remotely interesting, cute, or quaint, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. Also, if you got your own AK and your own mods, I'd love to hear more about it in the comments below. I also want to give a huge shout out to everyone who is supporting this channel on Patreon. I could not do it without you. You keep the lights on. I don't monetize the channel in any other way. I go through a lot of equipment here to try out, a lot of camera equipment that breaks down eventually in the rain, because that sure as hell happened when I was filming. So anything that you can really help contribute is greatly appreciated. You can go help out at patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. And that's a wrap. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there. And as always, please take care. До свидания!